This is my true story. My son thought his crude power made him king of the house I built with my own 2 hands. One evening, right in front of his partner, he lifted his hand and struck me. Not just once, not only twice, but 20 times. Each forceful strike was met with her sneering face, her soft, quiet chuckle, as if I were nothing more than a ridiculous joke. I chose to remain completely silent. I counted every single hit. My cheeks felt hot and burned, but my strong will became entirely cold. He truly thought he had shamed me in public. He did not know that I still held the deed to the property. Before I share with you exactly what I decided to do, tell me where you're watching from and subscribe so more people can listen to my story. I clearly remember the start of this life like it was yesterday. He was just a small boy with scraped knees chasing a bright ball down the street, gazing up at me with eyes that believed I could successfully build anything. And perhaps I truly could. I carefully taught him how to swing a hammer, how to accurately measure a line straight, how to cut wood so it would perfectly fit. We worked side by side when he was just a youth, his small hands trying to perfectly copy my own actions. He felt great pride when he managed to drive a nail in without bending it sideways. Those were the exact moments I thought would form him into a man who honored hard work, who honored sacrifice. When he grew older, I signed the important documents for the house he would eventually live in. The bank requested a financial backer, someone with history, someone with trust. That person was me. I worked hard and I saved every single penny. I went without buying new shoes for some long winters. I mended holes in my old work boots and worked many extra hours so my family could possess more than I ever had myself. I signed the official mortgage papers with a steady, firm hand, never once imagining those exact same hands would one day be struck by him. At that precise moment, all I truly felt was immense pride. Pride that he had a secure roof over his head. Pride that my son could live in comfort. While I willingly carried the large financial load, I gave him the house not just as a secure shelter, but as a symbol, a specific place to raise his children, a place to build family dinners and loud laughter, a place to show the entire world that our family stood strong and united. That specific house was not just simple wood and brick. It was my blood and sweat pressed deep into those walls. It was the countless hours I spent working under harsh sun and heavy rain. It was my generous gift, the kind a father gives freely without any question. For many years, I walked by the house with quiet satisfaction. When I saw the bright lights on at night, I thought, my son is secure and safe. When I saw him carefully mowing the lawn, I thought, my son is steady and responsible. When I saw his wife, Alara, smiling at the front door, I thought, my son has found his full life. And I firmly believed, foolishly perhaps, that deep thanks was hidden somewhere in his heart, even if he never chose to say the words out loud. But the harsh truth grew more difficult to bear over time. The house that was always supposed to be a precious gift became my deepest sorrow. He completely forgot where it actually came from. He forgot whose signature opened the door for him. He forgot the countless hours that successfully built the walls. He started speaking as if it were all his own victory, as if my hands had never touched the foundation at all. The things I once imagined had hardened into bragging, and that bragging slowly turned into cruelty. Still, I chose to remain silent. A father holds hope. A father makes excuses. A father believes the best possible outcome, even when the reality is sharp and painful. I told myself he was simply young, just proud, just finding his final path. I told myself respect would surely return with time. I told myself patience was the only possible cure, but that patience slowly became the tightrope around my own neck. I gave him absolutely everything, and one night in front of his partner, he repaid my sacrifice with 20 violent slaps. As my face burned fiercely, I remembered the hammer in his small hand, the boy who once looked up to me, the house I gave him, the documents I signed, the meals I missed, the hours I worked, and the grief that began with sacrifice ended that night in total shame. The gift I gave had become sorrow, and that sorrow had completely turned into a rage colder than frozen winter steel. It did not begin with fists. It never starts in that manner. It began with words, sharp and completely careless, like little knives being tossed across the dining table. His wife, Elara, loudly laughed at every single mean joke. She poured his drink and leaned in close, and he grew much bolder with each sip of the alcohol. "Oh man," he called me. "Useless weight." I sat completely quiet, the food placed in front of me completely untouched, my hands resting still on the table. I told myself to stay perfectly calm. I told myself to breathe slowly, but then came the quick shove. His hand forcefully pushed my shoulder back. Not hard enough to throw me onto the floor, but hard enough for the people in the room to laugh out loud. And when laughter comes out, cruelty finds its true courage. He slapped me once. The sound was sharp, quick, and I instantly felt the intense sting on my cheek. Before I could even move, he slapped me again. The second hit hurt far more, not because of the physical force, but because of the deep shame. His wife covered her mouth with her hand and laughed behind it, pretending to be shocked, but clearly loving every single second of the spectacle. He looked around the room, feeling proud, as if striking me somehow made him larger and more important. The count grew. 3, 4, 5. Each hard slap came with a cruel word, a curse, an intense insult. 6, 7, 8. My face burned intensely hot. My eyes began to water, but I strongly refused to cry out. 9, 10, 11. The room became blurred, not from the force of the hits, but from the shame pressing heavily down on me. 12, 13, 14. His striking hand grew tired before his pride ever did. 15, 16, 17. My ears rang loudly, my skin swelled up, but still I kept sitting. 18, 19, 20. When the last strike landed, the room was completely silent for a breath, and then his wife clapped her hands together as if she were watching a great show. My chest rose and fell slow and heavy. I could clearly taste blood in my mouth, but I swallowed it down. I would not give them the personal satisfaction of seeing me spit it out. My hands stayed folded neatly in my lap. My back remained perfectly straight. I would not raise my voice in anger. I would not strike back physically. I sat still and silent while they laughed. They sincerely thought my silence meant extreme weakness. They believed my stillness meant total defeat. But what they utterly failed to see was the fire deep in my chest quickly turning to ice. That hour, that horrible hour, was the longest hour of my life. Every single slap was not just skin hitting skin. It was a memory being destroyed. It was respect being ruined. It was 30 years of hard sacrifice being spat upon the floor. He did not just hit me 20 times. He hit every nail I drove, every dollar I saved, every hour I worked. And when it was finally over, I slowly rose from the table, nodded once to myself, and walked out the front door. No shouting, no begging for mercy, just pure silence. But in that lasting silence, a cold, hard decision began to form in my mind. The slaps ended that specific night, but the shame did not disappear. Bruises eventually fade away, swelling goes down, but humiliation does not heal quickly with time. It follows you everywhere. It clings to you like glue. It waits in every single corner of the street. The next morning, when I stepped outside, I saw nearby neighbors standing on their front porches. They looked directly at me, then quickly looked away too fast. Some shook their heads slowly, some whispered to each other. The sound of my shame had traveled much faster than the morning breeze. I pulled my old coat tighter around my body, not because I was physically cold, but because I felt stripped completely bare. His wife made completely sure of it. She had taken out her phone that same night, smiling at the camera as if it were a huge party. A video here, a picture there, a caption written with total bragging. Respect your elders? Not in this house. She laughed when she posted it online. Her friends laughed hard in the comments below. By morning, more people had seen it than I ever wished would. What happened inside those walls had clearly spilled out into the street, and the street carried it much further than any fist could reach. The house I built, the one I legally signed for, the one I freely gave him, became a stage for my public shame. That home was once my great pride, now it felt like my painful prison. Every brick that stood strong now seemed to mock me. Every wall that once sheltered me now felt like it trapped me inside deep shame. I could feel the large weight of the roof pressing heavily down on my shoulders. heavier than any hammer I ever swung. Neighbors who used to politely nod stopped coming by the house. Friends who once visited regularly found easy excuses to stay completely away. Even family members spoke to me strangely. Their voices carried pity, not the respect I deserved. Their eyes held shame, not warmth. It was not just the slaps. It was the public knowing. It was the fact that what should have been private, what should never have happened at all, was now completely common knowledge. And I wore it clearly on my face each time I walked outside. I heard children whispering loudly as I passed. I heard adults lower their voices when I drew near. The intense sting of his hand had faded from my cheek, but the sting of their whispers lived fresh in my ears. I felt like a man stripped of his proper place. The father who built, the father who gave, the father who sacrificed, all gone, replaced by the old man who had been slapped 20 times by his own son. That was my official name now. That was my title. That was what they all thought of me. Inside, the silence was even worse. He walked through the house as though absolutely nothing bad had happened. His wife smiled brightly at him and quickly brushed past me like I was nothing more than a piece of furniture. They laughed together loudly in the kitchen, the sound traveling down the hall, filling the home with a fake joy that cut me much deeper than the slaps ever could. They acted as though my pain was a joke to be shared, a story to tell, a thing to be proud of. I could hear them clearly through the walls, their loud laughter louder than any storm. That house, the one I generously gave, had completely turned against me. It no longer felt like home base. It felt like absolute proof of my own foolishness, proof that I had given too much money, proof that I had trusted too blindly, proof that I had mistaken his bragging for true strength. And as the days passed, the shame grew larger, not smaller. Each whisper, each laugh, each glance added immense weight to my chest. But shame possesses two distinct faces. One is intense pain. The other is perfect clarity. And as I carried the first one, the second one began to grow. They had turned my generous gift into a public stage. They had turned my silence into a cruel joke. They had turned my dignity into complete ashes. But they had carelessly forgotten one crucial thing: the documents, the deed, the title. The house he wrongly thought was his kingdom was still mine on paper. He had mocked me inside the very walls I still legally controlled. And as the whole world laughed, I began to carefully plan my move. That night, when the house grew quiet and still, I did not sleep at all. I sat at the old wooden table with only a single lamp burning. The light was soft, yellow against the walls, but my heart was hard and cold. I pulled the familiar shoebox from beneath my bed. It was the very same shoebox I had kept for many decades, filled with all the papers of my life. Old letters, old receipts, but most critically important, the deeds and titles. I placed them on the table one by one and spread them all out like cards in a serious game. My hands trembled slightly, but not because of fear. They trembled from the immense weight of the power I held. There it was, the title of the house, his house, the one he constantly bragged about, the one he slapped me inside of, the one his wife laughed in. I stared intensely at the paper for a long time. His name was absolutely not written on it. Mine was. He genuinely thought it belonged to him, but the law clearly said otherwise. The mortgage was mine, the guarantee was mine, the property was mine. The same hands he violently struck were the very same hands that still owned every single brick of the house he confidently walked through. I thought back to the day I signed those papers. I had stood tall then, feeling proud to give him something I never had. I believed I was successfully building his future. I believed I was giving him strong stability. But looking at the title today, I saw it totally differently. It was not a gift anymore. It was a chain he had wrapped tightly around my neck, pulling it tighter with each slap, each insult, each sneer from his wife. But chains can always be broken. And I suddenly realized that night that I held the key to breaking it. I sat for many hours reading every single line of the papers. My eyes followed the words slowly, very carefully. I wanted no mistake to be made. I wanted absolutely no doubt. Every clause, every signature, every official stamp reminded me clearly that the house was mine, not his. My heart steadied with each important word. The law was on my side. The world had openly mocked me, but the law would not mock me. The law would carefully listen to my ink the same way it had listened to my son's loud laughter, and that simple fact gave me strength. I closed the shoebox, placed the title on top of the other papers, and rested my hand on it. My fingers pressed hard into the paper until I could physically feel my pulse in them. For the very first time since the slaps, I did not feel powerless. I felt control slowly returning, quiet like water filling an empty cup. They thought they had completely broken me. They thought they had stripped me of my dignity. They thought they had turned me into nothing but a joke. But in that moment, looking directly at the title, I knew a crucial thing they did not know. The joke was entirely theirs. The papers were not just simple words on the page. They were weapons sharper than fists. They were hammers heavier than hands. My son had completely forgotten who signed his life into existence. He had forgotten who placed a secure roof over his head. He had forgotten that the same old man he slapped 20 times was the same old man the law still officially recognized as the true owner of his world. And that night I remembered everything. I folded the title very carefully, slid it back inside the shoebox, and slowly closed the lid. My decision was not loud or angry. It was not fiery or rushed. It was cold, like ice forming on a still pond surface. Tomorrow, I would finally act on my plan. Tomorrow, I would forcefully remind him of the hard truth. The house he wrongly thought was his was still mine, and I would definitely take it back from him. When the shoebox was back safely under my bed and the lamp was turned low, I sat in the dark and thought about all the possible choices I had. I could have screamed loudly that night when his hand struck me. I could have immediately called the police. I could have run out to neighbors, shown them the bruises, and begged desperately for their help. But noise does not successfully build respect. Screaming does not repair dignity. The louder a man fights, the smaller he looks when no one is listening. I had been made small once at that dining table in front of his wife, in front of their cruel laughter. I would not be made small again in public, so I consciously chose silence. Silence is colder. Silence lasts much longer. Silence does not fade away like a bruise mark. My son foolishly thought his fists made him powerful. His wife foolishly thought her sneer made her clever. But neither of them truly knew the heavy weight of paper. Neither of them knew how cold and sharp a signature could be. They had mocked me on floors I built, under a roof I fully paid for, inside walls that still carry my name. If my shame happened there, then my revenge would happen there too. I thought of the house itself. Every nail I hammered, every beam I lifted, every shingle I placed, it was all work specifically meant for his comfort. And he turned that thoughtful gift into a public stage for violence. The thought burned me intensely at first. Then it instantly froze. My decision arrived like deep winter, slow, steady, and without any mercy. Winter does not shout when it takes over the land. It silently creeps in, covers everything completely, and leaves nothing untouched by the cold. That was precisely how I would answer him. I could already clearly see it happening. The stunned look on his face when he returned home and found his entire life gone. The intense anger in his voice when the front door locks no longer opened for him. The complete confusion in his wife's eyes when furniture was being carried outside. When strangers walked calmly through her kitchen, when the world they built on my back entirely crumbled into dust. They would know the truth then what they refused to know before. The hand that gives can also quickly take away. My decision was not simply revenge for the small pain in my cheek that would quickly heal. My decision was for the dignity they had tried so hard to steal. A father can easily forgive a simple mistake. A father can easily forgive youthful pride, but a father absolutely cannot forgive 20 vicious slaps and the loud laughter of a wife who clapped happily while it happened. That was not just simple cruelty. That was total disrespect. And disrespect completely deserves serious consequence. So I firmly decided I would sell the house immediately. Not tomorrow, not next week. Now. I would not give him any warning. I would not speak a single word of it. I would not give him the chance to beg, to promise, to lie. He would go to work that morning believing his world was completely secure, believing his personal kingdom stood perfectly strong, and while he worked his shift, that world would quietly collapse, piece by slow piece, under the swift stroke of a pen. I leaned back in my chair and breathed deep. The night outside was cold, but I felt much colder inside. My heart was no longer heavy with deep shame. It was steady with firm purpose. That is when I knew my final choice was set. Like winter, it would not be stopped. Tomorrow, I would walk into my lawyer's office, place the title on his desk, and successfully start the quiet storm that would strip my son of the house he wrongly thought was his. The slaps were his gift to me. The silence afterward was mine to him. But the house was mine to take. The next morning, I woke before the sun fully rose. The house was completely still. The air was sharp and cold. I put on the same old coat he once mocked, brushed the dust from my shoes, and tucked the shoebox containing the deed under my arm. My steps were slow but perfectly steady as I walked down the street. Each crunch of gravel under my feet felt like a steady drumbeat in my chest. I was not walking to work. I was not walking to beg for anything. I was walking to legally reclaim what was rightfully mine. At the lawyer's office, the heat from the radiator filled the room, but I still felt the cold of my solid resolve. The lawyer, Mr. Wallace, was a man I had known for many years. He looked at me, then at the box, and said softly, "What brings you in today?" I did not tell him the painful story of slaps or shame. That was not needed at all. I told him only the simple facts that truly mattered. "I want to sell a house," I said. "This one." And I laid the title document on his desk. His eyes studied the paper carefully. Then he simply nodded. "It is entirely in your name. We can proceed right away." The sound of his pen scratching across the first legal form was louder to me than any strike my son ever gave me. With each page turned, the plan unfolded perfectly. The listing, the contracts, the trust details, the buyers. There was nothing loud or violent in the room, just a slow, steady sound of legal procedure. Where my son had used fists, I used ink. Where he used loud laughter, I used silence. We arranged the process clean and precise. No loopholes, no cracks for him to possibly crawl back through. The sale will be immediate. The ownership will move into new hands without any delay. I asked for the money not to return to me alone, but to be carefully divided into a trust for those who had shown me respect. Workers, caretakers, people who had treated me kindly when my own son would not. The lawyer wrote it all down very carefully, making sure every clause was completely ironclad. I signed each paper slowly and deliberately. My hand did not shake at all. Each stroke of my pen felt exactly like a hammer blow. Not against wood this time, but against pure bragging. I remember teaching my son how to properly hold a hammer, how to build things, how to respect the weight of a tool. Now I was showing him the weight of something much heavier, a father's quiet, strong justice. By the time the papers were finished, I felt significantly lighter. The lawyer shook my hand and stated clearly, "It is final. Once the buyers move in, there's nothing he can possibly do." I sincerely thanked him and walked out with my coat pulled tightly around me. Outside, the air felt sharper, cleaner. I had not raised my voice. I had not physically struck back, but I had struck something far, far deeper. I thought of my son at work, laughing with his friends, bragging about his life, absolutely sure that his home would always remain his. He did not know that at that very hour, strangers were walking calmly through the rooms he thought he owned, looking closely at the walls, opening the closets, planning where their own children might sleep at night. He did not know that the very house he raised his hand in was already slipping completely from his grasp. The legal thread was woven tight, and he possessed no scissors sharp enough to cut it. His fist could not undo signatures. His pride could not erase official stamps. His laughter could not rewrite the law. The house was mine to give, and I had successfully given it all away. When I returned home that evening, I sat again at the same old wooden table. The shoebox was empty now. The title was gone, passed into the hands of the law. My face still carried the faint marks of his slaps, but my chest carried something much stronger. The clear knowledge that I had answered humiliation, not with uncontrollable rage, but with permanence. He had left small marks on my skin. I had successfully taken the very ground from under his feet. The day came quietly. He woke in the morning, stretched his arms, kissed his wife on the cheek, and laughed loudly as he left for his job. His steps were proud, utterly careless, the same swagger of a man who believed his world was completely unshakable. He did not even glance at me. He did not remember the bruises on my face. He did not even think of the title I still legally held. To him, the house was his established kingdom. To me, it was already permanently gone. Not long after he left, cars began to pull into the driveway. First, the realtor with folders in her hands, then the movers carrying boxes. They walked through the doors he once called his own without any hesitation. Strangers stepped calmly into the living room. His wife came out of the kitchen, her eyes wide with fear, her voice sharp and demanding. "What exactly is happening here?" she loudly demanded. The realtor handed her the official papers. She read them, but the legal words meant nothing real to her. "This house has been legally sold," the woman said calmly. "Please gather all of your personal things." Her face drained completely of color. She shouted loudly. She called my son repeatedly. She waved the paper frantically in the air. But the man kept working. Box after box left the house. The house quickly filled with the sound of packing tape. I stood silently in the corner, watching everything unfold. I did not smile at all. I did not speak a word. I only watched the life they built on my back being carried out piece by piece. Each box that left the door was not just furniture. It was a firm lesson. Each rug rolled up was not just fabric. It was the end of their complete bragging. By noon, the house no longer looked like it was theirs. The family photos were gone. I thought of the night he slapped me 20 times. I thought of her loud laughter, her cruel sneer, and I thought of how sure they both had been that I was powerless. But here I was, standing steady while their world was systematically taken apart before their very eyes. They had believed cruelty would go completely unpunished. When the last box was carried out, I stepped outside. His wife sat completely still by the door, her face buried deeply in her hands. I walked past her without a word. There was nothing left to say. The house was gone, sold while he worked, taken from them as quietly as they had taken my dignity. And as I walked away, I felt no heat, no fire, no triumph, only peace, because justice had been firmly done in silence. Evening came, and with it came my son. I heard the familiar sound of his car pulling into the driveway, the key turning the lock, but the front door did not swing open as he expected. Finally, his wife opened it slowly from inside. Her face was pale. She only handed him the official papers. He stepped inside and instantly froze. The house was completely bare. His laughter died instantly. He shouted at the empty air. He ran frantically from room to room. Every step he took brought him more panic. He found me sitting in the kitchen, the one chair left behind. I did not rise. I did not speak. I only looked at him. He glared intensely at me. "What did you do?" He roared. I said nothing. I pointed a finger to the counter where the realtor had left the final copy of the sale papers. He picked it up, his hands trembling. The pure rage left his face then, not all at once, but slowly, replaced by fear. "No," he whispered. "No, this can't be." His wife leaned against the wall, her voice low. "It's gone. The house is gone." He turned back to me, almost begging for help. "Dad, you can't, you wouldn't." But I already had. The silence between us was stronger than his pleading. The silence told him the final truth. He tried to argue, but every single word bounced off empty walls. The law had already spoken its final word. His fist could not fight ink. He stumbled back, helpless, as strangers carried out the last pieces of his life. His wife sank into a corner, silent now, broken, and he stood there, a man stripped of everything, watching his entire kingdom walk right out the door. I rose at last, put on my coat, and walked past him. I left him there, standing in his own complete ruin. The house he thought would always be his had slipped away in a single day. The ruin did not stop at the walls of the house. It spread outward. Neighbors who once watched from their windows now whispered in small groups. They had seen him strike me. They had heard the laughter of his wife. And now they saw the moving trucks. He got what he deserved. Friends who once filled his rooms no longer called him. His wife, who once sneered as he raised his hand against me, now carried shame heavier than gold. Even at his job, the news followed him. He had once bragged loudly about the house. Now all of that was gone, and so was the respect he had demanded. The humiliation he gave me spread back to him 10 times over. He could not step outside without feeling eyes watching him. He learned the harsh lesson not from my direct words, but from the emptiness around him. The same neighbors who once saw me as the old man now looked at me differently. Some gave me quiet nods of respect. They knew the full truth without me ever speaking it aloud. My son, once surrounded by friends and comfort, now stood in complete ruin. His wife, once proud and cruel, now tasted the bitterness of silence. I walked away with nothing but my old coat and a small travel bag, yet my chest felt lighter than it had in many years. Behind me stood the house I built, now empty of his laughter, no longer chained to my name. Ahead of me stretched quiet streets lined with whispers. But this time, the whispers were not about my shame. They were about my justice. They were about a father who had been struck 20 times, mocked in front of strangers, and yet found a way to answer without raising his hand. The house did not vanish completely. It still stands. But it no longer legally belongs to him. It no longer belongs to the son who believed fists could erase 30 years of sacrifice. It no longer belongs to the wife who smirked as she watched him do it. It belongs to strangers now. And that is exactly as it should be. I gave my son everything a father could give, and in return, he gave me 20 slaps across the face in front of a woman who laughed. That was his shameful gift. My final gift back to him was silence. Cold, unshakable silence. Silence that sold his house while he was at work. Silence that left him standing in ruins. He will remember that day every time he sees an empty wall. And he will know it was not anger that ruined him. It was the careful hand of the same father he mocked, signing away the very ground he confidently stood upon. I still wear my old coat. It keeps me warm. It is proof that I endured deep winters he could not survive a single day of. And now when I walk the streets, that coat feels significantly lighter because I carry no public humiliation with it anymore. Final thought. He slapped me 20 times on his own floors. I sewed those very floors while he was at work. I watched the life he scorned carried out in boxes, and I left him with nothing but cold silence. True story.